Do you dream of making your living writing fiction, but don't know where to start? Believe me, I understand. I worried and struggled over my writing for years, afraid it was cheesy and amateurish, and not truly resonating with readers. Meanwhile, at every turn, I was told I couldn't make money this way. It takes too much time, too much hard work. It's not a real job. I bet you can relate, right? Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret the traditional publishing industry, and let's face it, most of society at large, doesn't want you to know. It's very possible to become a career author, to make your living writing stories full of emotion and passion and morality. With all the upheaval and negativity in our world right now, people need your stories more than ever before. Stories only you can tell, only you can bring them. I created this podcast to show you how, and I promise it will take less time than you think. So, join the revolution of authors following their passion and changing lives, both their own and those of their readers. We are prolific authors. Okay, so let's jump into the topic for this week, which is how to discover what your character yearns for. I'm going to apologize a little bit in advance. I have a lot of people in my house right now and people are listening to music. So I don't know if the mic is picking that up, but if you hear a little background music, well, just pretend I did it on purpose because I wanted background music today, okay? All right, so anyway, back to the topic. So we have talked about OODs before on this podcast in episode 11, and this is not quite the same thing as an OOD, which remember stands for object of desire. And how they're different is that the object of desire is what your character is actually trying to accomplish in the plot. So it does tend to be pretty external. There's an internal and an external one, but it's what they're actually trying to accomplish either in the short run or in the long run. This is really more internal than that. It's about what your characters, at the risk of sounding really cheesy, kind of like what their hopes and fears are about themselves and about the world they live in and what they want out of it. You'll kind of understand a little bit as we go along because I'm going to give you some examples. But the question is, how do you figure out what your character actually yearns for? So I'm assuming at this point that you have a pretty good idea who your character is. Their personality, what their arc is going to be, at least a general idea. But this is important to know because if you feel like your character is not quite as fleshed out as you want them to be, and there's not quite enough depth in their character arc, this is a really good way to add depth, right? So how do we figure this out about our character? For any of you who are Game of Thrones fans, you'll recognize this. This is a character from Game of Thrones. I believe this was, I don't have a attribution tag on there, but I believe this is a fan pop meme, and I have it pinned on Pinterest. That's how I know what it is. This is a picture that comes from the TV series, but the text comes from the novel, and so the text itself didn't make it into the TV series, okay? And I'm going to read it to you. It's actually very tragic, and then I will explain why I am showing you this. I've put the text here on the side because the meme is a little bit hard to read. So here's what it says. At least he did not dream. He'd dreamed enough for one small life, and of such follies, love, justice, friendship, glory, as well dream of being tall. Now, if you are familiar with the character, that's going to strike you as really, really tragic, okay? And it is. So for anyone who is unfamiliar with this character, let me give you a little rundown. As you can tell, if you know anything about the actor and from the picture, this is a man who has dwarfism, so he has some physical limitations. In the story, he has a lot more strikes against him than just his physical limitations, though, okay? He comes from a terrible family. His father pretty much hates him and makes no secret of that. His mother died in childbirth, and his father basically blames him for killing his mother. His family, on top of that, is very wealthy and very ruthless. So he has this added problem of anytime he has a friend or a lover or anyone, he never knows if they're there because they like him or if it's because they have an agenda because his family is very wealthy. So he has problems physically, emotionally, when it comes to relationships, lots of different things, okay? He has lots of strikes against him. So understanding that, what's actually going on here, where this text comes from, is that he has been kind of tricked by his father into going into battle. And given his physical limitations, he's pretty sure he's going to die in battle the next day. He can't really hold a sword, he can't run fast, he can't really ride a horse. And his father did it on purpose, probably kind of hoping that he'd be killed in battle, because that's just, his father's not a nice guy that way. And so Tyrion, this character, is he's not sleeping well and he's very worried about what's going to happen the next day. And it talks about in the book how he at first can't sleep and he tosses and turns, but then he finally falls asleep. And that's where this particular text comes into context. So let me read it one more time. At least he did not dream after he finally falls asleep. He dreamed enough for one small life, and of such follies, love, justice, friendship, glory, as well dream of being tall. So you see that it's very, very tragic. And for the record, for anyone who, again, that isn't familiar with Game of Thrones, he is a very sympathetic character, okay? He is a hero. We love him. We root for him. In fact, he's a fan favorite because he is such a massive underdog, right? He's got so many things against him, so many injustices in his life that we want to see him find some happiness and find some justice. And these are the things that he is yearning for, okay? And the reason I'm using this is because it's a really great example of figuring out what your character yearns for, what they really want and what they don't believe they can have. So I've always loved this meme, even before I really thought about it from a, technical writery standpoint. But what I decided to do is to really kind of dissect it and figure out how to apply this to other characters. All right, so let's talk about that. The first thing you want to do is explain the yearning and relate it to the character. Now, this would be what I told you about the situation he's in. And when I say explain the yearning, here, that's when they're talking about dreaming, okay? For him, it's better not to dream because he's dreamed too much, or he thinks he has. So do you see how you can kind of relate that to your character? He's somebody who does dream of things that he doesn't have, and he never gets them, so he's sick of yearning for those things, okay? So this is just explain the yearning as it relates to your character. If you're writing a very no-nonsense character that doesn't yearn, then you would probably say that. Maybe they secretly want something, but they're not going to sit around yearning for it. If you're, again, it's going to depend on your character and their personality and the world they're in and all of that. So this is something that you need to adapt to what you are writing. So that's what you're going to do first, is explain the yearning and relate it to the character. Then you got to come up with something they don't think they can have, even if they can. Okay, so this is probably going to be metaphysical, right? It's not going to be something literal or tangible. Chances are it's going to be something they want in their life, like love, but they don't think they can have it. Okay, so for Tyrion, it's this part that says, and of such follies. And they're follies to him because he doesn't believe he can have them. That's the way that the author is communicating that. Love, justice, friendship, glory. That's what he yearns for, but he doesn't think he can have it. And it's for all the reasons that I explained about the character, because of who his family is, because of the way his world is, because of his physical limitations. He doesn't believe he can have those things. Now, technically, we all know that he could theoretically get those things. He could find love, he could find justice, he could find friendship, but he doesn't believe he'll ever truly find them. Okay, so those are the things that he's yearning for. And again, adapt them to your character. So let me give you a different example so that you can see something beyond the one that I'm explaining. If you were doing this for someone like Elizabeth Bennet, right, from Pride and Prejudice, she doesn't yearn for marriage. We know that. But if she's going to get married, she wants it to be a deep, abiding romantic love. So that is what she yearns for. If we look at Luke Skywalker, he, in episode 4, A New Hope, he's yearning for adventure. He's yearning for something beyond the world that he's been raised in. And he feels like there's adventure out there for him. That's what he's yearning for. So you have to adapt it to the character in the story. The third step here is to compare it to something they truly, realistically can't have. Now, this is going to become a little tricky because not all characters are going to have something physical that is impossible for them. But I would challenge you, at least for your main character, your main POV hero or heroine, try to come up with something, okay? So for him, it's the being tall thing for Tyrion, because he's a dwarf and there is no cure for that. Even with the magic in the Game of Thrones world, it's just not something that's possible, right? So he's always going to have that physical limitation. So he compares his yearning for love, justice, friendship, and glory to the fact that he also yearns to be tall and to have a more, normal, socially acceptable body like other men have. And he knows he can't have that. Realistically, that's never going to happen. You see what I mean? This is kind of the dynamic we're dealing with here. He's yearning for something. He talks about something he doesn't think he can have that's probably metaphysical, even if he can. And then he compares it to something he really, truly, realistically can't have, which is being tall. So if you're going to do this with your characters, I would, like I said, recommend coming up with something that they realistically can't have, okay? But that they kind of want. And the idea here is that he's pretty much accepted who he is physically and that that's never going to happen. It's really not that. It's a big deal for him. But you can see that maybe on some level, of course, he wants to be more normal, because we all want that, and to be able to fit in and not have physical limitations. But he's focusing on the things he doesn't think he can have: the love, justice, friendship, and saying, it's so ridiculous for me to think I can have those things, because I might as well think that I can, change my physical body and become a tall person. So do you see what I mean? Do you see how this can help you to explore what your character yearns for? So that's what I want you to do, and I'm going to challenge you to do it. I will put together a PDF so that you can have these 3 steps on your computer. Just download it, or on your phone, and that way anytime you're fleshing out a character, you can refer to them, and maybe even refer to them every time you go to write a chapter, because it will give you, you can actually adapt this chapter to chapter, because, of course, what the character wants throughout the book will change. So you can ask yourself what they want in this chapter, what they're yearning for, what their motivations are, and use these to kind of get them front of mind before you write your chapter. But it will also always remind you of what this character wants and who he or she is, and to help you to bring that out when you're writing that particular scene. Okay? So let me go over it one more time, just to recap. You want to explain the yearning, or maybe lack of yearning, and relate it to the character, to who they are, to their world, to their motivations, their objects of desire, just in a really general way. Then come up with something they don't think they can have, even if they can. And chances are this is something metaphysical, like love, like friendship, that sort of thing. And then have them compare it to something more physical that they truly, realistically can't have. Okay, and then you get a sequence much like this that George R.R. Martin put in for Tyrion. I'm going to read through it one more time. At least he did not dream. He had dreamed enough for one small life. And I love that he puts in that small life bit, because that goes back to his physical limitations and how he sees himself. And of such follies, love, justice, friendship, glory, as well dream of being tall. All right, I absolutely love that. It's one of my favorite things. And this is why Martin has been so successful, because he can flesh out these characters in such a, really visceral, emotional way that makes us connect with them. All right, so that's pretty much it for today. Go download the PDF in the show notes and use this to help flesh out some of your characters. It can really help to deepen your character's desires and the empathy that your readers will feel for your characters. Okay? Thank you so much for listening today. I will see you next week. And whatever you do, go out there and write your passion. Bye for now. Me again. Before you go, if you found value in this episode, I would love it if you could leave me a review. Reviews are the best way to show your appreciation and help others find this podcast. Be sure to screenshot it, share it on your favorite social media network, and tag me at LK Hill Books. Remember, the world needs your stories. Only you can change someone's heart with your fire-breathing dragons, your mind-blowing mysteries, your epic romances, and your intense thrillers. So join the revolution and be a prolific author.